That's not right. There was a droplet. Did it phase through the floor due to the velocity? I'll try it again then. That was deafening, but in a good way. They could have made the sound of them eating a horrible slurping noise. I always try to appreciate the little things. The third favourite sister, with 20 supporters and 11% of the votes, was surprising to me. Uta, lying in her silver hammock in her damp grotto. We haven't visited her since episode 3 or 4, I think. It's amazing how the force of her personality over such a short amount of time has allowed people not only to remember her, but to choose her above all the other sisters.
Remember this, spirit. You must fill yourself with me completely. Collect all lymph to the last drop. Only then will a breakthrough be possible.
Just to make sure we weren't sitting around playing catch with the fireflies. He does imply that we have to drain all of the colour in the void, as in go to every single chamber and take all of the lympha, but that would be completely unreasonable, and we don't have enough space inside ourselves anyway. I'm sure there were some people that played this and were confused or perturbed by that. I hope you're enjoying that sound. That's you lot's fault, that is. Speaking of you lot, you managed to split the votes up for Uta pretty perfectly into 3 categories. Assistance, aesthetics, and cool, I'll call it. There was one who didn't fit these categories. He didn't really have an opinion at all. Agent Rush thought that it was impossible for one person to have that much impact, and therefore any decision would ultimately be meaningless. It's a very fair point. Even if one world is built up out of a single personality, people are going to build their own personalities within it. I'm getting a sense of deja vu. I think I've said something like this before. But anyway...
Fear death. There is no death in the void. No regret. No one will protect you better than I.
Shush for a second, will you? So, when Agent Rush decided it purely based on which sister he felt most connection to, it looks like he considered himself and her to be extremely jaded or lazy. That's, I think even Uta would get a bit worked up about you, Agent Rush. The first 2 people who said she helped also considered her to be a bit too cold, at least to begin with. Nikas thought her sense of kindness had been eroded, which implies that she had a sense of kindness before, and as she opens up, she gives us a heart. Maybe she just has a strong sense of justice. Vickers thinks similarly, that she started off quite hopeless and managed to open up, and underneath just seems like a really good person. You may think that with a world based on someone as laid back as Uta, it would quickly become stagnant, but JT Distortion says that the fact that she gave us a heart is a point against this. Puchiko points out that out of all the sisters, very few have given you any help or advice without an ulterior motive, but Uta has, even though most of the time she seems completely apathetic towards us. Puchiko also introduces the importance in assessing the aesthetics of a sister's chambers by saying it could be a preview to the next limit. Uta's chamber is a bit cold, but you could argue that the rest of the void is very similar, and a more gradual approach is needed in changing something for the better. I've already said myself how the entire void is a very gradual movement towards something brighter, until it switches over pretty much exactly parallel, so I'm inclined to agree completely. Uta got a whole slew of votes based on the aesthetics of her chamber. Only one other sister really did, Ailey, perhaps, but it was more focused around one particular object. We'll go through that in due course, and even then it wasn't about how nice it looked, more about... blimp obsession. I'm pure awesome! Voted for Uta, because her chamber just pours atmosphere and crazy surreal. Well said. Dilb has a love of small watercraft, so Uta was an obvious choice. And he's also apprehensive of sending up someone who's enthusiastic, which is a bit bemusing, but there you go. Moonin flows with the water, wells and dreams, likes the idea of the moon shining in the dark sky, a melancholic seer, lost in her thoughts. I can appreciate that. 9 Goats Dead thinks Uta's world is beautiful, and that's reason enough to choose her. Full Metal Jacket wasn't sure what sort of basis the game wants you to make your decision on, so he chose Uta because she sleeps in a boat like Rosie and Jim. I can actually remember most of the theme song for that. If I get to ask my younger self one thing, it'll probably be, how can a couple of puppets on a canal boat make for thrilling TV? Anyway, it's more of a canoe than a boat, but it's very much the thought that counts. Sirocco says that one of the overarching themes of The Void is its art history. This is backed up by Kellenved, who notes that Uta appears to be the iconic sister of The Void, since she featured prominently in the promotional material. According to Sirocco, if the aesthetics of The Void is a reflection of the potential of the new world, then since Uta has such a nice chamber, she should be the one to be ascended. I'm going to put the fact that Uta is mysterious in the cool category, because it seems to fit well. Bork 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 then says that this makes her the most worthwhile creation. Quite a jump in logic there, but he then has a great theory how we're married to Ole, Yanni is our child, and all the crashing going around in their chamber is us stumbling around in a drunken rage, as we're simultaneously kept alive and slowly destroyed by the consumption of vodka. This entire game can then be my redemption, isn't that nice? Although I still have the option of killing the 2 sisters and repeating my mistakes. Whoops.
I will give you the power to control time.
Generic Footwear voted for Uta on a gut reaction because of her cool, icy temperament, and it'd be interesting to see what she does on the surface. Syncope thinks she would be objective and fair because she isn't entirely cold, more just incredibly calm. Veyrol likes Uta's soothing voice and thinks it's either created or enhanced by her cold demeanour. Like an ice sculpture, her beauty would disappear if she warmed up. I love that description. McGintib likes that Uta hasn't tried to convince us of anything, she's been very consistent. While others have tried to change our minds with their suggestive bodies, waiting until we've proven ourselves, Uta's just let us get on with it, and I suppose it's an important quality to know when to just step back. YOTC has made a very interesting choice. He's given his vote to my favourite sister. Well, the sister I chose in my first playthrough was Uta. And Asymmetrical, ironically, has the thought process most similar to mine. His decision eventually came down to a gut feeling, and he knew before he'd seen the other sisters which one he'd choose. And it was the same in my case. Something about the serenity of her chamber and the way she interacts that implies that there's something warmer underneath that resonates with both of us. When I first played through The Void, I didn't have the benefit of someone going through, pointing out all the little details and working up a picture of who would be most appropriate. There are probably far more logical choices I could have made, but I wasn't in a position to do so, and now I doubt I'd change it with hindsight. I know through personal experience that I'm more attracted to the quiet type that liven up very rarely and really only open up completely to you once there is a strong bond of trust. Uta seemed to be that sort of person, so there you go. I didn't fall for a video game character, she just invokes that sort of feeling. There was some kind of semi-vote for Uta as well that I didn't actually count. Scribblykins again thought her chamber was beautiful and that she'd shown some kindness by helping us, but there was also mention that she'd suffered the most. It's really hard to tell who's most hard done by in a place such as The Void, but the only brother whose cruelty is actually referred to in the game is Uta's brother Mantid. Possibly Warden too, actually, but you can see how this could make Uta become less emotive, trying to do the least that she can do in order to avoid further punishment. Scribblykin's actual vote was for Ailey, bringing up several points. She's very blunt and cynical, very honestly and directly tells us that an ascension is possible, and what that might entail for us. Furthermore, there's that all-important capacity for change, not to the same extent as Una, who changed her entire personality. Instead, she changes her perception towards us, by calling us brave and saying she'd previously thought we could only take. She was the only one to voice such praise. Speaking of which, thanks very much to Scribblykins and anyone else who bought this game because of the LP. Anything that helps the developers is wonderful. All I can ask for are kind words, and there have been plenty of those too.